for some reason, Norman Osborn became interested in Judas Traveler, basically because Judas's powers of deception. But what it doesn't do is describe Norman's purpose for using Judas Traveler. It doesn't explain why Norman wanted Judas Traveler or how he manipulated him. It doesn't explain that in the least bit. And I find that very disappointing. Because Judas Traveler, looking back on the Clone Saga, played a pretty big part, a pretty big role. So that wasn't very well explained, unfortunately. Just everything, it's very clever and believable, the way Osborn reacts to almost every major turn of events in the Spider-Man universe. From everything from Bart Hamilton as the Green Goblin, which is Harry's psychiatrist, the other Green Goblin, which was Phil Urich, who was actually a good guy, the Hobgoblin. He talks about all that stuff that happens while he's away in Europe. So it's all very believable and logical, which is a good thing. Yeah, it does a great job of connecting the plot details. However, one thing about this to note, it directly conflicts with the future storyline called The Final Chapter, in which Norman Osborn, it's revealed that he was responsible for the switching of Aunt May with an actress to make it seem like Aunt May died. And the real Aunt May was really kidnapped by Osborn. But, yeah, that is not acknowledged in any way in this book. In fact, quite the opposite. Osborn denies, or actually, he admits that he had no involvement with the death of Aunt May. He wishes that he had done it, but he had nothing to do with it. So that is a big-time confliction with that other story arc, The Final Chapter, which I hate. I think the death of Aunt May should have never been retconned, or at least not retconned in that manner, the way they involved Norman Osborn. It was a mistake, and they could have brought back Aunt May a different way. But yeah, I'm not saying that Aunt May should have never been brought back, but the manner in which they did it with Norman Osborn, no, because the Osborn Journal clearly shows that he wasn't responsible for that. The artwork is, standard. It's kind of confusing, but very comic book looking, kind of cartoonish, exaggerated, high contrast. Not that bad, really. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's my review of the Osborn Journal, which is a very, it's a big book for being a one-shot. It's 32 pages. So I was really like, wow, this is a lot of information. Well, they had a lot of ground to cover, but it does such a remarkable job of tying up loose ends to the Clone Saga. And the big question that I had, the whole reason I wanted to read this book, was to find out how it could have been possible that Peter Parker and Ben Reilly did a home test on themselves to determine who was the clone, and it came out that Peter Parker was the clone. And I was like, how is that possible if they did it themselves? Well, the reason is that Norman Osborn had been manipulating Seward Trainer, who was actually a assistant to Miles Warren, the Jackal. So basically, Norman Osborn threatened Seward Trainer and said that I'm going to ruin your reputation if you don't adjust the equipment, if you don't basically rig it to make it seem like Peter Parker will always be the clone. So that was the plan all along. That's how it happened. They were using Seward's equipment, so therefore it gave them the negative results. Oh yes, one more thing. The Osborn Journal talks about the skeleton in the smokestack, which is a very controversial storyline. They're having a hard time coming up with a plausible ending for that one. Yeah, when they revealed the skeleton in the smokestack, they made it seem like that was the original clone. But yet Ben Reilly and both Peter Parker were still alive, so what was the skeleton? If the skeleton was the clone, then is Peter and Ben Reilly both real? Are they real people? So that was the whole catch to get Peter Parker to return to New York to undergo this investigation. So they had a hard time concluding that, but this book takes care of it and says that what actually happened was the Jackal threw in an extra clone that had failed, so a previously flawed clone was tossed into the smokestack after the Jackal removed Ben Reilly from the smokestack. So very confusing, but it still makes sense if you just logically think about it. The skeleton was there as a way to further confuse Peter Parker and Ben Reilly. And it's kind of funny because the Jackal's motives and the Jackal's strategy to get revenge on Peter, because the Jackal wanted revenge on Peter, his strategy was pretty much the same as Norman's, which is really convenient for the writing, and I'm not sure I can agree with that. But yeah, they both just wanted to confuse the hell out of Peter and Ben, and they did. So later on, after the Jackal dies, Norman Osborn inherits the company, that warehouse, industrial plant, whatever you want to call it, and he has them destroy it so that the skeleton and the smokestack will be revealed, thus bringing Peter and Ben into, like this questioning, what is the skeleton? Where did it come from? That was used as a way to bring Peter back to New York, because Peter had moved away to Pittsburgh to live his life with his wife, Mary Jane, and his daughter on the way. And Norman didn't like that. He wanted to bring Peter back into the New York scene so he could get revenge on him, because Peter was happy. He had settled on the idea that he was a clone. He was okay with it. But Norman didn't like that at all, and that's why he revealed the skeleton, and it ended up working. Peter came back to New York just like Norman wanted, but it didn't drive a wedge between Peter and Ben like Norman had planned. That's what Norman's plan was, to drive a huge wedge between them, and they ended up just being like brothers, really friendly. But so yeah, I'm glad that it resolved that. Very nicely done. Thumbs up to the writer, Glenn Greenberg. Great job of writing the Osborn Journal. Spider-Man fans, if you haven't seen this, I urge you to pick it up, find it, do whatever you can. This is an important part of Spider-Man history. You gotta own it if you're a collector. I don't know why it's not worth more, because it's so significant. And the Clone Saga, that's a long time period, and all those plot holes that are out there drifting, they finally got tied up, but only tied up with this book. So without the existence of this book, there's a whole lot of plot lines just drifting around out there that Spider-Man fans would be confused about. So this book is extremely important.